Chapter 1645 Altar. Chapter 1645 Altar. The God's Relic was the burial place of many proud sons of heaven. This time was just like it had been in the past. Many people had fallen here. However, it was very rare for people of Gai Shir's status to fall here. For one thing, everyone there was very strong, and for another, their opponents would usually show mercy. After all, he was the heir to the golden divine nation. If other members of top forces fell here, it is possible that the people here would not care. After all, there was nothing unusual about that. But they would definitely care about someone like Gai Shir dying. Even though in the past, people of his level had been killed, they had been killed by people who were even more powerful than them. For example, the people of the Central Emperor realm could ignore it if their fellows were killed by people from the other top forces, since they were very strong themselves. But Futian was someone without any background. He called himself the disciple of the Sky River Great Elder, and had killed Gai Shir. This was not something that made sense. But everyone knew that war was chaotic, and when deep enmity was involved, things did not always make sense. After all, the people from the Golden Divine Nation had attacked him and Yusheng. If Yusheng had not been strong enough, he would have died at the Renhuang's hands. Futian stood there in the sky, holding his spear. He swept his gaze over the people from the Golden Divine Nation and said, "Get out of here." He had not slaughtered them all, killing only Gai Shir and the Renhuang. They were the main figures of the Golden Divine Realm here anyway. As for whether the rest of them lived or died, he really didn't care. If he let them return, they could report what had happened to the Golden Divine Nation. They would tell them who had struck first. The people from the Golden Divine Nation turned and left. What would be the point of remaining there? They had not gained much from this trip to the God's Relic, and most of what they had gained had gone to Gai Shir. With his death, it could be said that the trip was a complete disaster. It would be difficult for them to explain themselves when they returned. "You're letting them go," Dozhao whispered. Futian was very kind. If it had been him, he would not have let even a single one of them go. He would have slaughtered them all. "There would be no point in killing them all," whispered Futian. He turned and walked over to the statues. He could see Yusheng bathed in the statue's light. Brilliant divine light was falling from the palace in the sky, making Yusheng's body change continuously. His eyes were closed, and it seemed like he was calmly taking everything in. The great path was resonating within him. The inheritance that had been left here must be good. Although it would be difficult for it to let Yusheng directly break through to the next level, it would probably put him within a step of that level. This would be a great boon to his cultivation. When will I get a chance like this? Dozhao watched Yusheng enviously. That guy had been able to defeat him when he used the will of the sevenfold, will of the fighting god, even though he was at a lower level. Once he had forged a law body just like Dozhao had, he would get even stronger. At that point, even the sevenfold will of the fighting god wouldn't be enough. "You are truly not polite at all," Futian praised him. "We're all family here, why should I be polite?" said Dozhao cheerfully. He hadn't forgotten that this guy had many treasures taken from the sacred hall. "You are right," said Futian with a smile. Dozhao was well suited to his own temperament. His combat ability and capacity for violence were similar to Yusheng's. His personality was not that sincere. He was brazen and shameless. It could be said that he was a combination of Yusheng and Little Condor. "Since you also say we are family, I will also not be polite the next time I need a weapon," said Dozhao, looking at Futian. He obviously still had the idea that he needed magic weapons. If he could equip the elders in his family, they would be able to directly sweep into the Ziwei realm. They were not able to wield the full power of the weapons from the spatial sacred hall, due to their level. Their true power could only be unleashed in the hands of Renhuangs. "Are you serious?" whispered Futian. 5 weapons was not enough? Why did he feel like this guy had just ruined the mood? By that point, all of the fighting had calmed down. The heirs all appeared within the 9 statues, and no one else was bothering Yusheng. 2 Renhuangs had already fallen. The people of the Celestial Worthy Temple had fled, and the Renhuang from the Golden Divine Nation had been killed. Who else would dare interfere? As for the other battles, Qin Lin of the Slaughtering World's inheritance had been seized. Although the slaughtering world was not weak, they were not strong enough to withstand attacks from many other forces. They had no choice but to give up their spot. Futian. At that moment, the swordmaster of Lihan flew downward and landed beside Yi Futian. He had recalled his powerful sword will, but even so, he still looked like a sharp sword. Yi Futian smiled brightly when he saw him. He had a perfect divine wheel, and had the power to kill a Renhuang with a single strike. He was so happy for him. He remembered that he and the swordmaster of Lihan had misunderstood each other the first time they had met. At that time, he had fought his way to the 33rd layer of Lihan heaven and defeated Wang Chuan. But the swordmaster of Lihan had not only not blamed him for this, but he had also given his sword to Yi Wuchen. Afterward, the sword that he had given Yi Wuchen had played a key role in the Battle of the Empty Realm. After that, he had participated in the Battle of the Crimson Dragon Realm. As far as Yi Futian was concerned, he owed him several times over. He was a man of measure and grandeur. Otherwise, even given a chance like he had just had, he would not have been able to forge a perfect divine wheel. Now, seeing that the sword master had finally reached the level that he had been pursuing for so long, and had, in fact, succeeded far beyond his hopes, he was naturally very happy for his friend. You have a perfect divine wheel, showing that your following of the way is flawless. I hope that your sword will one day sweep through the 3,000 realms of the Great Path, said Yi Futian with a smile. I can feel that my sword has become incredibly strong. In the past, I felt His Majesty's power, and thus challenged him on purpose in order to learn more. But now that I've formed my own wheel, I can feel that it is different. It is a flawless feeling. Is this what is called a flawless divine wheel? The swordmaster of Lihan asked. It seemed that he still did not really understand divine wheels. Yes, said Yi Futian with a nod. Even people who rule an entire realm, like Lord Taixian, will not necessarily have perfect wheels. As far as I know, the god's relic is a special place. When added to the fact that you reforged yourself, this allowed you to forge your perfect wheel. There are few people in the 3,000 realms of the Great Path who have done this. When he had been in the ancestral land of the Divine Palace, the mysterious person there had told him some of this. Cultivating at the ancestral land would give one the chance to forge a perfect wheel. Thus, he speculated that the god's relic and the ancient Renhuang who had fallen here were different. He must have been a Renhuang from before the collapse of the heavens. The swordmaster of Lihan was shocked when he heard what Yi Futian said. He could feel that his wheel of the Great Path was different, and the previous battle had proved his strength. But he had not thought that it was quite this extraordinary. If that was the case, then he, a swordsman who had come from Emperor Xiao's realm, had become one of the top swordsmen in the 3,000 realms of the Great Path in a single step? Would he have to abandon His Majesty then? This made him feel very strange. After all, he had followed Emperor Xiao for many years. Perhaps this is fate, said the swordmaster of Lihan with a smile. He was not terribly excited. Swordsmen had to focus on swordsmanship. No matter how strong or weak they are, they needed to have an indomitable will to move forward. It was the same for saints and renhuangs. It was the same in the past and now. He would follow his own sword path to the end. Congratulations, came a voice. It was Yaya. She and the swordmaster of Lihan were old friends. In the past, the two strongest swordsmen in Emperor Xiao's realm, the swordmaster of Lihan and the sword saint of the void, were often compared to each other. Yi Futian is the one who gave me this chance. I have taken the first step onto the Renhuang plain, and I will wait for you here, said the swordmaster of Lihan. Given the relationship between Yi Futian and Yaya, he would certainly not deny her an opportunity. Said Yaya with a nod. She looked at Yi Futian. Ah! Feeling Yaya's eyes on him, Yi Futian shifted his gaze and looked at Yu Sheng. It's taking him a long time. Yi Futian had a strong desire to survive. The swordmaster had been lucky enough to find a chance to break through to the next level. He had no way of guaranteeing that Yaya would be able to have a chance to forge a perfect wheel. He had no choice but to play dead. Yaya stared at him, but in reality, she did not care too much. She would not force the issue. As they were speaking, someone came out of his statue. It was Shenhao. In the instant that he stepped out, The statue that was bathed in light from the celestial palace above disappeared. He opened his eyes, and a beam of divine light shot out of them, incredibly sharp. He seemed to have changed. He swept his gaze over the people before him, then at those beside him. Next, Jian Qingzhu, Nan Luoshan, and the others finished as well. They came out of their statues one by one, each statue disappearing into nothing once they exited. It was as if they never existed. Once they exited, some of them looked at Yi Futian, and the swordmaster of Lihan, and others looked at Yu Sheng. Although they had been inheriting the will of the statues, they knew what had been happening outside. The battle that had just taken place had been brilliant. Moreover, a swordsman who had forged a perfect wheel of the great path had appeared. And Yi Futian had given his own chance for an inheritance to his friend. Before he had even reached the Runhuang plain, he had given his opportunity to another. It did not need to be said that this Yi Futian was an extraordinary person with incredible talent. Yu Sheng was the last one to enter a statue. Thus, he was the last one to come out. As he opened his eyes and stepped out, the great path resonated within him. He looked at Yi Futian, and Yi Futian looked back at him with a bright smile. Then the statue disappeared like an illusion. At that moment, the light coming down from the celestial palace, which had been restrained at first, burst with brilliance. Boom! A fierce rumbling sound rang out as the palace began shaking. An invisible force had covered the sky stairwell that went up to the palace, but now it collapsed and split apart. Soon, the sky stairwell disappeared, making it seem like the celestial palace was no longer rooted to the ground. It burst with incomparably brilliant light, and one beam of the light shot up into the clouds like a bridge connecting the palace to the sky. Is the final inheritance going to appear? Everyone trembled on the inside. They held their breath in anticipation. This was the first time anyone on the trip to the god's relic had gotten this far. This was the first time they had gotten to the end. What was hidden here? If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. Chapter 1646 Shadow of the Emperor. Chapter 1646 Shadow of the Emperor. Inside the relic, everyone was looking up at the heavenly palace, as if it were the real divine residence. Numerous rays of sunlight sprinkled down from the sky above, and the light beam that penetrated downwards had activated the passage to heaven. The divine will of some Runhuang-level cultivators had moved in that direction, but they found that their will was blocked and could not penetrate the brilliance of the sun's rays. Heaven has opened, Yi Futian murmured. The view in front of him was incredibly beautiful. What's that? Above the heavenly palace, an illusory shadow loomed, gradually solidifying. It slowly turned into an extremely sacred figure, standing high above the heavenly palace. It seemed to be the true divine god. Is that the master of God's relic? Many people wondered. After they came here, they had speculated, and so had Jian Qingzhu. All four sides of the relic led to this place. And judging from all angles, this place was clearly the location of a supreme palace. This supreme being was once the master of this place. Whether it was the treasure inside the spatial sacred hall, those divine trees, or the books, they all once belonged to him. Then the figure that appeared before them could very well be the existence of God, the great emperor. At this moment, everyone looked solemn, for no one in the 3,000 realms of the great path had reached that level. This was someone who stood at the top of cultivation, the being that was truly supreme. Whether it was the #1 genius of the Tianshan Academy, the heir to the Shun clan, or even the princess of the Nantian divine kingdom, each had a look of respect in their eyes. No matter if this supreme being still existed in the world, they dared not be disrespectful. Many even bowed slightly to salute the supreme figure in the void, which was their way of paying respect to the supreme being. The phantom seemed to be alive, yet ethereal and untouchable. Yi Futian looked at the sky above, and recalled similarities to the time when he first encountered Emperor Yi Qing. But this supreme being only had a trace of will that remained in the world. Was that trace finally awakened because someone had arrived here? What kind of place was this? After Donghuang the Great and Emperor Yi Qing unified the world, Why did they open God's relic to allow the people from the 3,000 realms of the Great Path to come here to cultivate? Was it to give the cultivators of 3,000 realms of the Great Path an opportunity, so that they had a chance to create a truly perfect divine wheel? From what he knew, the two emperors were hoping that the world would preach and make martial arts prosper. So there was indeed such a possibility. So, was he coming here to receive the inheritance of this ancient great emperor? Breaking into God's relic, opening the doors to the relic, and then dissolving the will of the divine generals who guarded the heavenly palace was, in fact, like a complete inheritance. It was not only Futian who was guessing. Everyone else also had their own ideas. Those of the top forces also believed that this might be the inheritance left by the gods. The ethereal shadow that appeared at this moment. Could that be the fallen great emperor from the ancient war times? They all had a strong desire and expectation in their hearts. If they could really have the chance to obtain the inheritance of the emperor's relic, such an opportunity would be completely based on luck. Among all the countless inheritances that existed within the 3,000 realms of the Great Path, none could compare to this level of inheritance. At least for now, no one had discovered an emperor's relic elsewhere. Some time ago, the demonic emperor's inheritance appeared in the heavenly mandate realm, but the demonic emperor did not show up. It may have been that the demonic emperor's will had been integrated into the demonic realm, so it was not really an inheritance from the emperor. Even Shen Hao of the Shen clan showed a very strong sense of expectation in his eyes. If he could obtain the true emperor-grade inheritance, then perhaps one day in the future, the Shen clan could stand at the peak of the 3,000 realm of the Great Path. Moreover, he would also have the opportunity to pursue the supreme realm. Jian Qingzhu from Tianshan Academy stared at the void, also with great anticipation. He didn't expect the great emperor to really exist in the relic. Nan Luoshan's beautiful eyes also hovered over the heavenly palace. This time, could she take it? Everyone had the same idea, and that was to obtain the inheritance. They had even forgotten about their own strength, talent, and whether they could compete with those top figures. With this kind of opportunity right in front of them, who could resist? As long as they got it, they would have the opportunity to become the top figure in the 3,000 realms of the Great Path. Just like Jian Qingzhu from Tianshan Academy and Shen Hao from the Shen clan. At this time, the heavenly palace shot out incomparable divine light that scattered between heaven and the earth. In an instant, countless sacred flashes of brilliance fell upon the area below the heavenly palace, as if containing the real imperial might that covered the entire range below. Feeling the incomparably brilliant glow, a figure stepped out. It was Shen Hao of the Shen clan. He walked underneath the heavenly palace and entered the area where the divine light was spilled. In an instant, a supreme pressure fell on him, and his body fell from the sky under the tremendous pressure. Seeing Shen Hao's movements, many slowly understood something. The divine light that spilled from the heavenly palace penetrated through the heaven and the earth, like a light beam that could reach into the sky. Was this the final test? Likewise, Jian Qingzhu also moved forward and stepped inside without any hesitation. After that, top figures such as Nan Luoshan, Gui Zong, and Di Wu all entered one after another. The moment they stepped inside, will of the way exploded fiercely from their body, and their will was urged to the limit to resist the sacred glory that fell on them. But even so, they were still forced to fall downward. Go! A group of figures whizzed out and all headed there. However, some had just entered that area when the sacred brilliance fell on their bodies. Their bodies were no longer just simply falling, but rather being slammed down before hitting the ground. Their will almost collapsed, and their faces paled. Boom, boom, boom. Bodies kept falling from above, and in just a short moment, a countless amount had fallen to the ground, hitting it hard. Some couldn't even get up. If this were the final test of the relic, it would not be easy. Even though the real God's relic was right in front of them, it didn't mean that anyone could get their hands on it. Futian and his party gathered together, Yu Sheng by his side. All of them looked forward. Is the pressure this strong? Dou Zhao whispered. Emperor level. You want to try it? Futian asked. Sure, I'll give it a try. Dou Zhao nodded and stepped forward with a bang. This time he didn't hesitate to use the will of the sevenfold fighting god. When he walked, he was like a god descending upon the earth, heading toward the heavenly palace. Shen Hao, Jian Qingzhu, and the others were all under tremendous pressure, so Dou Zhao dared not give anything less than his very best. He knew exactly what level this pressure of might was. Boom! The moment Dou Zhao stepped inside, his body was suppressed downward, and under the divine pressure, his body kept falling down. It has nothing to do with realm. Yi Futian kept his eyes forward and said, "It seems to be similar to before. It is the suppression of will again." "What is the purpose of this test?" the sword master of Lihan whispered. He was somewhat puzzled. "You probably have to go in personally to find out," Yi Futian said as people continuously entered, with most of them being shaken off on the ground, as they couldn't bear the pressure. Those whose wills were not strong enough would just lie there, as if suffocating. Yi Futian glanced at that phantom, and wondered if it could be some great emperor from the ancient times? If he urged the will of the emperor, was it enough to counter this suppression of will? Ahead of them, as Shen Hao and Jian Qingzhu gradually adapted to the pressure of might, they were actually able to withstand it, and began to travel upward. As they looked up at the heavenly palace, their divine will was curious to enter the palace to see what was inside. Where did that sacred beam lead? "Go in," Yi Futian said, and suddenly a group of people all stepped forward, moving towards its interior. Whether they could withstand the pressure or not, they had to try, even if it meant failure. Yi Futian, Yu Sheng Swordmaster, Yaya, Xia Qingyuan, and many others walked into the lower part of the heavenly palace. In just an instant, Yi Futian had felt that most sacred might of the emperor. Regardless of cultivation and realm, when the emperor's might suppressed downward, all beings were forced to prostrate. This was different from the trace of will of the emperor that he possessed. This was the true legacy of the real great emperor. Its power was beyond imagination. Infinite divine light fell down as his body was suppressed down. His tyrannical will bloomed fiercely, resisting that might. He raised his head and looked in the direction of the heavenly palace. He saw countless rays of light, a beam of light that reached into the sky, and a most sacred figure like a god. Rather, it was a true god, standing there and overlooking everything in the world. Just a look from him, and the feeling would be unbearable. The majority of the people who were present had stepped into this space. However, except for the top figures of the major forces, everyone else was being suppressed without any doubt, as they were unable to resist it. Those who could remain standing were people who had extraordinary will. Boom! At this moment, a dull sound came out, and under the heavenly palace, someone was walking up against the momentum. It turned out to be Shen Hao. He urged the blood and vigor inside his body, so that his whole body was now able to see through everything and detected the secrets of the heavenly palace. Would the true inheritance of the relic be inside that palace? How powerful! Many people looked at Shen Hao, the strongest man in this generation of the Shen clan. Could he resist the emperor's might and inherit God's relic? Jian Qingzhu is also going up. Someone looked in another direction and saw that Jian Qingzhu, Nanluo Shen, and Guizong were all going up. Guizong had turned into a golden Buddha in an attempt to resist the will of the emperor. His eyes seemed to be able to see through nothingness. Even though his divine will was not sufficient to penetrate this power and enter into the heavenly palace, he could perceive that the secrets of God's relic were inside the heavenly palace. As long as he could enter the heavenly palace with his divine will, it was possible for him to detect it, and even possible for him to receive the inheritance of the relic. In this heavenly palace, standing on God's relic, even the incarnation of the will of the great emperor had appeared. The inheritance of the great emperor must not be far away. The same idea had also occurred to Yi Futian. His divine will went up, wanting to break through this might so that he could enter the palace and see what was inside. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. Yi Futian's divine spirit headed against the flow towards the heavenly palace. However, in front of him, there seemed to be an emperor's shadow standing there and suppressing him. The countless divine lights turned into might that prevented his divine spirit from invading. That it was hard to make a breakthrough. Futian's divine spirit headed against the flow towards the heavenly palace. However, in front of him, there seemed to be an emperor's shadow standing there and suppressing him. The countless divine lights turned into might that prevented his divine spirit from invading. It was hard to make a breakthrough. Boom. The intent of battle lingered around Futian, and even his celestial soul appeared. He opened both of his eyes and looked directly at the sky above. His eyes seemed to have turned gold, containing a dreadful divine aura. He still couldn't get in. A trace of the most sacred breath diffused from Futian's body, merging into the divine spirit, and directly rushing toward the heavenly palace. There was a dull noise, which sounded as if he had been able to force open a gap. Under this pressure of might, his divine spirit invaded the heavenly palace. However, what he saw after the invasion of the divine spirit was still just chaos. He could feel that he had entered the heavenly palace, but all that he could perceive around him was the golden divine light. There was an extremely curious feeling that inside here, everything seemed to be surreal and dreamlike. Nothing could be seen, or could be seen clearly. Could it be that there is nothing inside the palace? Futian thought. That's impossible. His eyes were extremely sharp, and his divine spirit faintly perceived that this heavenly palace held many mysterious auras. It was as if there were many divine items around his divine spirit. His divine spirit wanted to touch them, but couldn't perceive their exact location. They seemed close by, but also seemed to be far away and inaccessible. The omnipresent shadow of the emperor was still imprinted in his mind. Could it be that only when one had perceived the items within the palace, could they be clearly seen and touched? Futian thought. But how? His divine spirit had entered the heavenly palace, but was still no use. Everyone was here for the first time, and no one knew just what to do. Inheritance. Futian's thoughts turned again and again, and many thoughts appeared in his mind instantaneously. Inside the heavenly palace, the divine spirit was under tremendous pressure at all times, and he had no time to waste. At this moment he felt the power of another divine spirit. Obviously, the divine spirits of the others, like his, had come inside this heavenly palace. They had also encountered similar obstacles. This divine spirit was that of Jian Qingzhu, the first descendant of Tianshan Academy. His divine spirit, like Futian's, had invaded the heavenly palace. At this moment, he continued to move upward, and an incomparably bright will of the way dazzled on his body, to invade the heavenly palace along with his divine spirit. What is that? At this moment Jian Qingzhu seemed to perceive something. He saw that in the space seen by his divine spirit, a bright elusive light gradually solidified. It was ethereal and seemingly untouchable. At this moment, Jian Qingzhu knew what to do. He did not miss such an opportunity, and was completely immersed in it. Boom! The terrifying divine might suppressed his divine spirit, causing his mind to vibrate, and his body to tremble slightly. It was as if it might collapse under the pressure at any time. Almost. A thought appeared in Jian Qingzhu's mind, and he could almost see it clearly. How could he give up at a time like this? No matter how strong the pressure was, he had to make it out. An incomparable brilliant divine light burst from Jian Qingzhu. There seemed to be countless scrolls flying into the sky, submerging Jian Qingzhu within them. He urged his own will to the limit, and the power of his divine spirit had also reached its limit. Infinite will of the way and power surged into the heavenly palace. At this moment, that illusory figure gradually became clearer, and could already be seen. It turned out to be a volume of a book, radiantly dazzling to behold. Buzz! A wind blew inside the heavenly palace, and a most sacred brilliance fell down. The crowd could see that below the heavenly palace, and an even more dazzling ray of light flew out of the endless brilliant golden light. It seemed to be a book scroll. This extremely sacred scroll flew directly in the direction of Jian Qingzhu, the unearthing of the divine item. In an instant, countless people raised their heads to look at the light in the void, their eyes revealing the extreme shock they experienced. Had the divine items inside the palace come out? They also clearly saw that the book flew directly to Jian Qingzhu. Without any hesitation, Jian Qingzhu raised his hand and grabbed it. He then put it away without taking a closer look at all, which shocked many people. Jian Qingzhu of Tianshan Academy, had he inherited the relic of Heavenly Palace? Many disciples of Tianshan Academy looked at Jian Qingzhu, and they were happy for him. However, they were also a little jealous. To say that they hadn't thought of themselves would be a lie. Who didn't want to get the heritage of this relic? However, there was only one Jian Qingzhu in the world. Boom! Jian Qingzhu's body was knocked down. He had spent a lot of energy and will to resist. Before he could make out the scroll clearly, it flew out. Now, it was impossible for him to immediately repeat the whole process all over again. He would need some time to recover. What's going on? Even Jian Qingzhu himself hadn't figured it out yet. Judging from the previous situation, it seemed that as long as one could perceive and make out the things inside the palace, it was enough to make them fly out and become obtainable. And why was it this scroll? Was it a coincidence that it actually complemented what he cultivated in? Jian Qingzhu guessed that this might not be a coincidence. It was not that they were solving the secrets of the Heavenly Palace to receive the inheritance, but that the Heavenly Palace was choosing them. Moreover, the person must first be able to withstand this pressure before becoming eligible to be favored by the Heavenly Palace and be selected. It was almost unbearable even for him. He was almost unable to persist and risked wasting all his previous efforts. Although everyone from the 9 realms was a top genius, he understood that there were only a few who were truly qualified to compete for these items. Among these very few, there might be hope that they would encounter the same situation as him. A faint joy flashed in his eyes. As the divine object passed down from the Heavenly Palace, he thought that volume of the book must be a most extraordinary object that may have been left by the great emperor. It was a priceless prize. Although he was pleasantly surprised, Jian Qingzhu was in no hurry to read it. It was simply not the right time. Buzz! At this moment, another dazzling divine light flickered from the Heavenly Palace, and it seemed that another divine item flew down from the Heavenly Palace. There was a loud banging sound that came out successively, and the golden Buddha that was formed by Guizhong collapsed and shattered, as if being blasted by the great path. However, Guizhong raised his hand and grabbed the flying divine item directly into his palm. He opened his palm and looked. The divine item was suspended just above his palm, and it was a seed. Virtue. Guizhong smiled and squeezed his fist, and the seed integrated into his blood. At the same time, roaring sounds continued to be heard as Guizhang's body was continually suppressed downward. The second person after Jian Qingzhu turned out to be Guizhong, which clearly was unexpected. It appeared that this master from the mountain realm possessed terrifying talent and strength. No one even thought of plundering these divine items that came out of the Heavenly Palace. Not when the ones in question were Jian Qingzhu and Guizhong. They were at the pinnacle of their cultivation, those who had cast the perfect divine wheel of the great path. At the very least, they were the pinnacle existence in God's relic. How would plundering be possible? Whoever dared to be the first to strike would undoubtedly die, unless those top figures were fighting amongst themselves. Buzz! At this moment, 2 rays of light flew out at the same time, and suddenly 2 figures emerged at the same time, grabbing toward the rays of light. They were Shen Hao of the Shen clan, and Nan Luoshan of the Nantian Divine Kingdom. Obviously, these 2 peerless figures had also perceived some object inside the Heavenly Palace. Yi Futian's divine spirit was still inside the Heavenly Palace. He saw the divine items in the Heavenly Palace fly out, and he felt it the moment they did. He also knew who received what on the outside. For a moment, a thought occurred to him, and it seemed to echo with the expertise of his cultivation. A tyrannical will of the way blended into his divine spirit on the note of this thought. At this moment, his divine spirit seemed to have turned into the divine spirit of swordsmanship. He was intending on piercing the great power of heaven. Sure enough, in that elusive Heavenly Palace, something faintly became clear. It was as if it were being perceived by him. His divine spirit went there, and he saw a sword floating inside the Heavenly Palace. Or rather, it saw a sword that was transformed by a trace of sword intent. Buzz! A dazzling sword light flew out, headed towards the outside of the temple, and aimed straight at Yi Futian. That trace of sword intent entered into his will. It was extremely terrifying with considerable destructive power, causing its body to tremble. It also fell toward the ground below. The life spirit inside Futian whistled, and the ancient tree of the world swayed toward the sword intent. That terrifying sword intent, after encountering the ancient tree of the world, actually became gentle, and was then sealed inside the life spirit. Huff! Futian took a deep breath. He was just fretting about what gift to give Yaya. And this sword intent should not be any weaker than Xiaqing Yuan's lotus. That would be enough to help Yaya's enlightenment. All eyes were on Futian. Futian seemed to have also received a divine item, which appeared to be a sword. However, with the presence of the sword master of Lihan, and the great battle that just took place, it would not be wise to provoke Futian. Raising his head, Futian took a step, and with a powerful intent that swept out, he took to the sky once again. Clearly this was not enough for him. Recovered so soon? When many people saw Futian's action, they couldn't suppress their curiosity. Jian Qingzhu and the others had not even recovered when Futian went straight up again. Was this to loot the divine items in the heavenly palace now that he had gotten a taste of it? The heavenly palace was the last inheritance of the god's relic. Any divine items unearthed in the palace may contain the will of the great emperor, because it was something that was used by the great emperor. Just one item would justify the whole journey here, worthy of great benefits. If someone could have gotten two, at present, only a few people had gotten just one. No one dared to even dream of getting two. In years past, no one had ever come this far. This time everyone had reached the end of the relic. Now they had even gotten the things left behind by the great emperor. It was entirely conceivable that this time, a group of top figures that could cause a great disruption to the 9 realms was in the making. Once Jian Qingzhu, Shen Hao, and Nan Luoshan walked out of here, how would they change the future of cultivation? Perhaps they may become the strongest generation in many years. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Divine light was shining above the heavenly palace. Yu Sheng, under the pressure of the great path, tossed and turned his own demonic might until he resembled an overpowering demonic god. Divine light was shining above the heavenly palace. Yu Sheng, under the pressure of the great path, tossed and turned his own demonic might until he resembled an overpowering demonic god. As his demonic thought invaded the heavenly palace, he saw an extremely heavy and dark object. His demonic thought moved, and a rumbling sound was suddenly heard. He felt his own demonic thoughts being impacted violently, and inside the heavenly palace, a black object flew out of the bright divine light. It immediately attracted the attention of many. What is that? Many people postulated when they saw the black object. Even across such a long distance, they could still feel the weight of that black object. It looks like a rock, someone whispered as the black rock gave out an extremely heavy sensation. The black rock flew directly toward Yu Sheng and was caught in Yu Sheng's palm. In an instant, the rock penetrated his body. Boom! With a loud bang, Yu Sheng's body was being suppressed downward, and even his domineering demonic torso seemed unable to bear it. It seemed that Yu Sheng had also received a corresponding divine item. Afterward, a few more divine items flew out. Many expressed a look of wonder. They found it an amazing coincidence that whoever had received divine items were basically the same people who had previously received the inheritance of the statue, except for Futian. But the statue was decoded by Futian, so he should also count for half of it. So could it be that because they had inherited the will of the statue, which made their will even stronger? Was that how they were able to resist the divine might of the heavenly palace and obtain the treasures? Or rather, it was because of their own great strength that they were qualified to inherit the statue, so that it was only natural for them to receive the divine items? Of course, the most likely possibility was that they were strong in their own right, so they inherited the statue. After that, they became even stronger, so all that had happened was completely reasonable. Everything that happened could be coincidental, but could also be a matter of strength. Out of the 10 people who had gotten the divine martial spirit, 9 happened to be those who inherited the statue, with Yi Futian as the exception. The arrival of the slaughter world decoded the secret of the statue, but the qualification to inherit the statue was taken away by others. He didn't get the divine item, and his luck was pilfered by others. In this way, Yi Futian was more outstanding than Qin Lin. He was the only one who did not inherit the statue, but had obtained the divine item. There were also many other top figures currently under extreme pressure. Even their divine spirits had entered the heavenly palace. However, all they saw was chaos, and before they had time to make out any divine items, they were knocked out of the palace by that powerful authority of heaven. These people, including Shen clan and many top figures in Tianshan Academy, all seemed unwilling to accept failure and tried again and again. But after one failure, they found that the pressure on the second try was even greater, or rather it was because they had consumed so much energy before. Even so, Jian Qingzhu, Shen Hao, and a few others still stubbornly moved upward, standing beneath the heavenly palace. They wanted to perceive the divine items inside the palace. Aside from the divine items, was there also God's inheritance? Not only did they think that, but Yi Futian also thought the same. Since it was God's relic, it should have God's inheritance. This heavenly palace was the last relic, and the shadow of the emperor had already appeared. Bathed in the golden glow, an extremely brilliant radiance emerged from his body. His eyes changed, and turned into golden divine eyes that could see through the ages. Boom! The moment the divine spirit rushed into the heavenly palace, a sacred phantom of the palace itself manifested in his mind, and released all of its brilliant glory. Rumbling sounds were heard, and the entire heavenly palace was trembling. The emperor's shadow seemed to glance down from the sky. At this moment, there were two lines of sight that seemed to converge at the same time. Inside the heavenly palace, Yi Futian felt that there was a great emperor standing in front of him, with his hands folded behind his back like the lord of this heavenly path. A terrifying pressure of might penetrated Yi Futian's body, invading his eyes like the true will of the great emperor. So it is. At this moment, a sigh from ancient times seemed to sound in Yi Futian's mind. In the next moment, the emperor's shadow disappeared, and the heavenly palace bloomed with endless rays of light that were madly falling down. Those below only felt a violent shock to their divine spirits, and it was hard for them to open their eyes. What's happening? Many people resolved to close their eyes and withdrew their divine spirit, afraid to look or even peep. Shen Hao opened his divine eye, wanting to get a closer look, but a most sacred emperor's shadow appeared, and the pressure of the might stung his eyes so much that there was even a faint blood trace coming out. He let out a muffled groan and closed his eyes, daring not to peek anymore. What happened? Not just Shen Hao, but everyone else was asking, what had happened? They didn't understand why the emperor's might suddenly became stronger, and was now suppressing everyone. Only Yi Futian's eyes were still open. Everything around him had become surreal. Countless divine lights pierced down and sprinkled on his body, like the true great emperor descending into the world. Except for him, there was no other divine spirit that dared to snoop, let alone with their physical eyes. So this was it. What was the meaning of this sigh? Afterward, the incomparable sacred light poured directly into his body, and all the light in that heavenly palace went toward him. Will of the emperor. Yi Futian clearly felt that this was another will of the emperor rushing into his body. At this moment, the will of the emperor in his body seemed to be urged completely, releasing an endless glow. Yi Futian, with his robe fluttering, seemed like a supreme ruler. However, no one saw this spectacle at all. The ancient tree of the world swayed, blooming with extreme brilliance, swallowing up all the will that descended and glowing with extremely dazzling divine light. It's time. A thought came to Yi Futian. With a turning of his mind, endless divine light of the great path poured into his body and converged. Inside, many life spirits appeared at the same time. An invisible will of the way turned into rounds of sacred brilliance, sweeping across the world. There were sounds of rhythm, along with sword intent. The divine light gathered as an immense shadow enveloped Yi Futian's entire body. It was a guqin, and every string seemed to be cast by a sword with extreme sharpness. There seemed to be a series of musical notes floating between heaven and earth, and with countless sacred brilliance raining down, the Guqin gradually took shape and merged into Yi Futian's body. The divine light of the great path, the will of the way from the ancient trees of the world, and the infinite will between heaven and earth were now unified. If someone could open their eyes, they would see that there were countless Guqin appearing in this space. All the Guqin merged into one from outside to inside, until finally all of them integrated inside of him and turned into the divine wheel. Someone broke through the realm? Jian Qingzhu, Shen Hao, and the others could no longer perceive anything in the outside world, but they had a feeling. It was an elusive feeling and unpredictable, but it was like someone was breaking through the realm, and the sound of music could be faintly heard. After a while, another immense phantom of the golden divine elephant appeared. Countless idle phantoms of the divine elephant appeared between the heaven and the earth, trampling across the sky, which was extremely magnificent. Impressive and majestic divine elephants ran over the void, and then unified into one, accompanying the radiant divine light to merge into Yi Futian's body. Even the 10,000 bones of the divine elephant emperor inside of Yi Futian were integrated into the divine wheel. The divine will he cast was extremely radiant. Previously, the swordmaster of Lihen had also released a perfect divine wheel, but it was not nearly as brilliant as Yi Futian's. Besides, this divine will had incorporated an extremely sacred breath. Boom! A tyrannical divine spirit rushed into the sky. Yi Futian felt that the whole world had become different, and his divine spirit became even stronger, as if he himself was representing the great path. Ren Huang, sharing the same glory as heaven and earth, lived as long as the sun and the moon existed. At this moment, Yi Futian broke through into Ren Huang realm. His pupils became even more radiant, penetrating the heavenly palace, and looking at the line opened by the heaven and earth, his divine spirit seemed to rush into it. At this moment, Yi Futian's divine spirit seemed to travel through time and space. He saw an extremely spectacular scene, and his heart trembled violently. What is that? His heart trembled fiercely because of what he saw. What could be the meaning of all this? Boom! An incomparable divine might of the great path descended, as if the heavenly path was now closing. The eye of heaven was also closed. Yi Futian's divine spirit was shaken and knocked back, and afterward, the divine light gradually dimmed. The heavenly palace likewise became dimmer as well. Yi Futian retracted the power he had released, and everything seemed to return to normal. All eyes opened, looking at everything outside. What had happened just now? The heavenly palace is closed. Many people saw the closure of the heavenly palace as the divine light dissipated, and the emperor's shadow had also disappeared. What is happening? No one knew. They looked at each other, and then they realized that Yi Futian's temperament seemed to have changed. Ren Huang. Many people's eyes narrowed as they scrutinized Yi Futian. How could he have broken through in such a short time? Unless he had received some great advantage? However, Yi Futian had swallowed many fruits of the way before, and he already had the opportunity to make a breakthrough. By lingering without breaking through, the will of the way inside of him was sufficiently strong that it could almost support him in casting the divine wheel of the great path. It's just that before he didn't break through into the Ren Huang realm when he could, but chose to do it now that made one wonder about his timing. Yi Futian didn't notice the other's gaze, for his gaze was still focused above the void. It was something he could not describe, but that he had seen before. Outside the sky dome, he seemed to see countless other spaces, as if those were all parts of God's relic. At this moment, he remembered something he had heard before. Another name for God's relic. Tomb of the Gods. The heavenly path collapsed in ancient times. Could this be the tomb of the gods left by the fall of the gods? Was God's relic part of the tomb of the gods? He could not imagine what was in there, and who was in control of its entrance. Countless questions seemed to make him forget the joy of breaking through. What he saw just now had a great impact on him. Did you see what happened before? Jian Qingzhu asked Yi Futian. He had sensed that someone was breaking through the realm, and now it was proven that his perception was correct. Yi Futian had the breakthrough, at a time when he couldn't have seen anything. Then, did Yi Futian see anything? I saw it. Futian said. Suddenly, all eyes narrowed and stared at him. I saw the awakening of the great emperor, which resonated with me. So he bestowed his inheritance to me. I felt the call of the gods, and saw the inheritance of the gods. As witnessed by the gods, and as destiny dictated, I have proven the way and broke through the realm, Futian announced with the most solemn voice. However, everyone's expressions changed. This guy was now in Runhuang realm. Could he behave more appropriately? If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Donghuang the Great awakened and resonated with Futian, bestowing his teachings upon Futian. The various deities bore witness to this, and Futian's breakthrough was mandated by the heavens. Donghuang the Great awakened and resonated with Futian, bestowing his teachings upon Futian. The various deities bore witness to this, and Futian's breakthrough was mandated by the heavens. This was practically, although this was a Runhuang proving his way, for members of the top forces of the realms. Renhuangs were not existences that dwelt high above. Why would deities come to witness a Runhuang breaking through the plane? Mandate. What mandate? The top figures of the 9 realms had seen countless powerful existences, as well as monstrous figures. They themselves were such figures. They had never seen someone blow his own horn to such an extent. Futian practically had no sense of shame. If he was a child of destiny, then what did Jian Qingzhu, Shen Hao and Nan Luoshan amount to? How was it that he was the only one that saw the deities? No one believed Futian's nonsense. However, there were some who were still suspicious of whether or not Futian had obtained any divine item. Or, he might not have been able to see anything like the others. Under that pressure, he had chosen to prove his way and become a Runhuang, bearing the divine might. Did you or did you not get any divine items? In the direction of Shen clan, Shen Yuan asked in a cold tone as he stared at Futian. He had been pathetically defeated by Futian before this. Now he had seen Futian and Yusheng both obtain divine items with his own eyes. Some schemes naturally arose in his mind. Futian looked towards Shen Yuan and answered, I did not. Then, why did you choose to break through the plane just now? Shen Yuan continued pestering him. Futian swept an indifferent glance at Shen Yuan. His gaze was as though he was looking at an idiot. Futian did not answer this question. He turned and walked away. He had already answered the question of whether or not he had obtained something. No one believed him. Instead, they continued asking him the same question again. When he gave the opposite answer, they still did not believe him. If that was so, why did he need to answer them? No matter how he responded, it would be meaningless. Whether you believe the former or the latter, suit yourself, Futian said plainly. He was not answering Shen Yuan, but instead said this to the crowd. Asking was meaningless. Responding was also meaningless. They would believe whatever they wanted to believe. Shen Yuan narrowed his eyes. He had accepted that Futian had not obtained anything at all. In the situation just now, everyone had their eyes shut. Even Jian Qingzhu had questioned Futian. It was obvious that even Jian Qingzhu could not see anything at that time. Hence, Shen Yuan would of course not believe Futian to be more outstanding than everyone here. However, the fact that Futian had broken through the plane made Shen Yuan's imagination run wild. Or it might be that Shen Yuan did not covet what Futian had obtained later, but rather the divine item that Futian had obtained prior to this. Shen Yuan turned his gaze towards Shen Hao. Right now, Shen Yuan could not decide which was the truth. Before this, Shen Yuan had lost to Futian. Now that Futian had proven his way, his divine will was at least at the celestial level, and could possibly be flawless. Counting in the Swordmaster of Lihan, unless Shen Hao joined in the fight. Otherwise the Shen clan would not be able to deal with Futian's group. Jian Qingzhu did not ask any more questions. It seemed that there was no way to clear out the truth of the closing of the heavenly palace. It might have been due to God's relic itself. The 10 of them had obtained divine items. It might be that this heavenly palace only had 10 divine items. It was hard to tell. The others who had obtained divine items also did not inquire further. They each had their own spoils that were also treasures compatible with their own cultivation methods. This already made them very satisfied. This trip had not been in vain. Once they left this place, they would certainly study the divine items in detail and incorporate it into their training. Each person had their own fortunes. Once they obtained their own share, it was impossible for them to want to seize the shares of others. Aside from themselves, there were another 9 people. Would they seize all of the divine items for themselves? If they only focused on one person, would other people have the same idea as them and come over to seize theirs? Each person had their own fateful encounter. They would sooner or later face each other on their path of cultivation and see who would emerge at the top of the 3,000 realms of the Great Path. Those who were scheming were all those who had not obtained divine items. This included the crowd aside from the 10 of them, such as Shen Yuan from the Shun clan and the cultivators of the other forces. However, the ability of Yi Futian, the swordmaster of Lihen, and the rest of their group was a powerful deterrent. Even if anyone had any ideas, they would most likely be unable to successfully seize the divine items from them. The battle prior to this had already proven many things. "How are you doing?" The swordmaster of Lihen revealed a look of anticipation in his gaze when he saw Yi Futian walking over. With Yi Futian's talent, the divine wheel of the great path that he forged should be a flawless one. Yi Futian did not need to reconstruct his great path like the swordmaster of Lihen had done. With a smile from Yi Futian, the swordmaster of Lihen understood what he meant. As he had expected, Yi Futian had forged a flawless divine wheel. "Swordmaster of Lihen, after we leave this place, let's go find His Highness to have a few drinks," Yi Futian said with a smile. The swordmaster of Lihen was stunned. He then smiled at Yi Futian and said, "You rascal! Even though you are a Renhuang, His Highness is still His Highness." As the swordmaster of Lihen said this, he glanced over at Xiaqing Yuan. He did not know how far the relationship between Yi Futian and the princess had progressed. Back then, the princess had watched as Yi Futian ascended Lihen Heaven's 33rd layer of heaven. The swordmaster of Lihen naturally had hopes for the two of them. Xiaqing Yuan also glared fiercely at Yi Futian. What did he mean when he said he was going to have drinks with her father? "Of course, I am only going to find His Highness to have a drink with him. I have no other intentions," Yi Futian said with a smile when he saw Xiaqing Yuan's murderous gaze. The swordmaster of Lihen nodded his head. His Highness had been at the Renhuang plane for many years. Although he was a lower-level Renhuang, his plane should still be higher than their own. His divine will was at least at the peak of the 2nd tier. It was even possible that he had a 3rd-tier divine wheel. However, the level of Emperor Xia's divine wheel should not be high. Although the swordmaster of Lihen had not fought Emperor Xia before, he could faintly sense that flawless divine wheels had a suppressive effect on other divine wheels. That meant that he had a more powerful great path. If he was against someone with a flawed divine wheel, he might be able to take on his opponent, even though his opponent was on a higher plane than he was. Of course, the swordmaster of Lihen needed to actually pull it off before he could know for sure. Although he had previously slain Renhuangs, they were all Renhuangs who had just reached the Renhuang plane for the first time in God's relic. "Yaya." Yi Futian looked at Yaya beside him. Yaya raised her head slightly and looked at him. "I got you your present," Yi Futian said and smiled. Along the way, when facing many life-and-death situations, if it wasn't for Yaya protecting him, he would have already died many times. He had long considered Yaya to be his own sister. He would not hesitate to give her even a divine item. The moment he obtained the divine item, he immediately thought of Yaya. "Oh," Yaya calmly responded. Yi Futian blinked. Was that all to her reaction? He did not feel any sense of accomplishment. "Let's go. While we still have time, let's see whether we can cultivate here," Yi Futian said. This relic was special and different from the outside world. As he said this, he immediately headed off in the direction of the divine tree. The rest saw Yi Futian leave. No one chased after him. "Let us also go and have a look," someone said. Even though the heavenly palace had already closed, they still had some time. They should take a look and see whether there were other fateful encounters in other corners of God's relic. They did not need to waste time here. Dou Zhao followed behind Yi Futian. He mysteriously walked up to Yi Futian's side and asked, "Did you actually have anything to do with the heavenly palace closing? I have already said, Dong Huang the Great awakened and bestowed me his teachings. The various deities bore witness to this, and my breakthrough was mandated by the heavens," Yi Futian replied. The corner of Dou Zhao's mouth twitched, saying, "There is no one else here. Can't you tell us the truth?" "I am telling you the truth, but you don't believe me." Yi Futian didn't bother to elaborate further. He was not lying. Seeing Yi Futian's expression, Dou Zhao knew that he had been ignored. Dou Zhao could never fully understand Yi Futian. "Who are you exactly? Where are you from?" Dou Zhao muttered. Was this fellow really from the Tianhe realm's Sky River Temple? Why did Dou Zhao feel like the origins of Yi Futian were somewhat suspicious? His talent was astonishingly high. Yi Futian brought Yaya to the willow tree, where Guizong was cultivating beneath just now. This old willow tree seemed ordinary, but Guizong had comprehended the way and transformed into a Buddha here. Surely, this was a great place for meditating. "Yaya, sit under the tree," Yi Futian ordered. Yaya sat down under the willow tree obediently. She raised her head to look at Yi Futian. Yi Futian sat opposite Yaya, saying, "When I received the divine item, I have refined it into my will. You need my guidance in order to control it." Yaya nodded her head. Then, a dazzling sword will lit up from Yi Futian's gabella, and it entered into Yaya's mind along with his will. "I will assist you in refining it," a voice sounded in Yaya's mind. In an instant, both their gabellas were seemingly connected by a streak of brilliant sword flash. The willow tree waved, stirring up a rustle. A formless sword will was born out of the blue in their surroundings, and it gushed towards Yaya. The corner of Dou Zhao's mouth twitched. It was a divine item excavated from the heavenly palace. The divine item might very possibly contain the will of Dong Huang the Great. Yi Futian gave it away so easily. Why hadn't he known Yi Futian sooner? It was not too late for him to get close to Yi Futian now, right? Yi Futian presented the opportunity in Sword City to the Swordmaster of Lihan, allowing the latter to forge a flawless divine wheel. Then, he passed the teachings of the statue to Yu Sheng. Now he gave Yaya the divine item of the heavenly palace. It seemed like he had also gifted Xia Qingyuan a fateful encounter. When he thought of all these, Dou Zhao had made up his mind. From now on, Yi Futian would be his sworn brother. He would not leave Yi Futian no matter what. He was the dignified descendant of Fighting God. Since he had acknowledged Yi Futian as his sworn brother, they would share all their resources in the future. After a while, Yi Futian opened his eyes. Yaya's body was shining. Endless sword will descended and encircled her, forming a cocoon of swords. The willow tree swayed and rustled. The leaves moved without any wind. Gradually, Yi Futian and the rest could sense a mysterious aura coming from the willow tree. This rocking willow tree seemed to have stirred up endless will, causing a storm of the great path to suddenly appear in this vast space. The storm surged frenziedly towards Yaya. "What tree is this?" Dou Zhao was shocked. The slender branches of the willow tree draped down, enveloping Yaya's body. The great path descended continuously and formed some sort of resonance with Yaya's body. Yi Futian could vaguely see an illusory figure. It was none other than the ethereal shadow of the emperor. "Has Dong Huang the Great cultivated here before?" Dou Zhao asked Yi Futian, who was standing beside him. Yi Futian nodded. Hopefully, Yaya would have a similar fateful encounter like that of the Swordmaster of Lihan. As time passed, Yaya was completely enveloped by the willow tree and the unceasing will. At the same time, countless streaks of light suddenly brightened up God's relic. Doors of space suddenly appeared at every corner of the relic. It was as though a spatial divine item had connected God's relic with the outside world. Most likely only Dong Huang the Great had the ability to create such a scene. When everyone saw these doors of space, they understood that it was time to leave. In God's relic, many people raised their heads in yearning, attempting to search for an opportunity at the very last minute. However, in the end, they crossed the doors of space and disappeared from sight. One by one the cultivators left. Those who left first were people who were most disappointed with the outcome of their trip. "It's time to go," Yi Futian murmured while staring at Yaya. If they were given a little more time to cultivate, it would be the best. Perhaps Yaya would have the opportunity to prove her way in God's relic. However, from the looks of it, it was too late now. Sword will surged. Yaya's figure broke out of the cocoon of swords. The sword will she emanated was sharp and intense. She looked at Futian. From Yaya's gaze, Futian knew that even though she had yet to prove her way, she was not far from doing so. Let's head out, Futian said. After that, those who followed him started flying up into the sky. Dou Zhao took a step upwards. When he was in midair, he suddenly looked down. Then he turned around and walked up to the willow tree. He hugged the enormous trunk of the willow tree with both his arms. His arms could only cover a small portion of the trunk. Without any premonition, he exerted his strength. Rumble. An intense sound could be heard. The willow tree shook as though it had sensed danger. However, Dou Zhao did not have any sympathy for it. His body shone with divine light. He activated the will of the fighting god and directly pulled the willow tree from the ground. Under the wide-eyed look of Futian, who was in midair, Dou Zhao uprooted the willow tree and then carried the huge willow tree as he traveled in the air. Impressive! Impressive! Futian stared at Dou Zhao in adoration. As expected of the dignified descendant of the fighting god, if you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. In the city of the ruins, doors of space appeared in various locations. Many silhouettes walked out from them, appearing in different locations. After they emerged, they took a deep breath and looked back at the door of space, seemingly with a sense of nostalgia. As expected, the will that they sensed in this space paled into significance when compared with that in God's relic, especially when compared with the area of the heavenly palace. The will in the two spaces could not even be considered to be on the same level. However, they were also aware that in this lifetime, it was possible that they would never have the chance to enter the city of the ruins again. In the city of the ruins, doors of space appeared in various locations. Many silhouettes walked out from them, appearing in different locations. After they emerged, they took a deep breath and looked back at the door of space, seemingly with a sense of nostalgia. As expected, the will that they sensed in this space paled into significance when compared with that in God's relic, especially when compared with the area of the heavenly palace. The will in the two spaces could not even be considered to be on the same level. However, they were also aware that in this lifetime, it was possible that they would never have the chance to enter the city of the ruins again. This was unless their planes remained stagnant, and they never reached the Runhuang Plain. This was also not what they wanted. If they could not reach the Runhuang Plain in 50 years, their cultivation journey would be near its end. Clearly, everyone hoped that they could have a better future. More and more people emerged from the doors of space. They divided themselves into groups. Members of the same force all walked out of the same door, and also appeared in the same location. Futian's group also came out of God's relic. They were all together. Futian looked at Dou Zhao, who had just appeared, and asked, "Have you hidden the willow tree?" A glint of embarrassment flashed past Dou Zhao's eyes. However, he bit the bullet and said, "You have also reaped many treasures from God's relic. Talk about the pot calling the kettle black. The willow tree was also a treasure. Their behaviors were no different from each other." "You're right." Futian pondered for a moment and realized he could not refute Dou Zhao's words. Dou Zhao's expression returned to normal. Speaking of treasures, most likely, Futian was the biggest winner among all who entered God's relic this time around. This fellow had obtained a spatial sacred hall, which was full of treasures. In comparison, Dou Zhao had only plucked a tree. When he thought of the difference between them, Dou Zhao felt despondent. However, Dou Zhao stared at Futian with a fervent gaze, saying, "Futian, we have faced life and death situations together during this trip. From now on, you are my sworn brother. I am the dignified descendant of fighting God, and I have unwavering loyalty. I only make friends based on one's personality and not one's origins. You're loyal." Futian was somewhat touched. "You're right," Dou Zhao continued. "In the future, feel free to call me for any matters. My resources are yours. Yi Futian blinked. Wait a minute. What did he mean by my resources are yours? In that case, did it mean that Dou Zhao could also claim Yi Futian's resources as his? Why did Yi Futian feel like this was somewhat sketchy? When he thought of such a possibility, he stared at Dou Zhao with a strange look. What are you staring at? Dou Zhao saw Yi Futian's gaze. What kind of look was that? He was so cautious. Let's not rush into becoming sworn brothers. It will be better if we start as friends, Yi Futian said after pondering for a moment. He couldn't help but be cautious of Dou Zhao. You, Dou Zhao pointed at Yi Futian stunned. He had not imagined this fellow to be this kind of man. In any case, he was the descendant of fighting god. Fine. Regardless of whether or not you recognize me as your sworn brother, I have considered you to be my brother, Dou Zhao proclaimed. His righteousness soared through his words. Yi Futian had to agree to Dou Zhao's idea no matter if he wanted him as a brother or not. This brat is more shameless than me, Little Condor, who was beside them, stared at Dou Zhao wide-eyed. This brat wanted to be Yi Futian's third brother? In that case, wouldn't Dou Zhao be a rank higher than him? This was impossible. Dou Zhao had to line up and wait for his turn. Everyone around Yi Futian also stared at Dou Zhao with perplexed looks. They were impressed. However, even though this heir of Dou tribe was somewhat shameless, he was quite interesting. One by one, many cultivators came out from God's relic. Numerous powerful wills covered the area where they were at. Before this, many top figures had left when God's relic opened. Then as time passed, many top figures were waiting outside for their juniors to return. After all, among these proud sons of heaven that had entered God's relic, some of them were from impressive backgrounds. For example, Nan Luotian was the only daughter of Emperor Nan and Empress Luo. How could the Nantian divine kingdom not attach importance to her? After everyone had emerged from God's relic, the doors of space gradually disappeared. Within the city of the ruins, the unparalleled space will of the way also dissipated. Everything returned to its original state, as though nothing had ever happened. Brilliant lights shone. Up above, a carriage traveled across the sky, entering the city of the ruins. Yi Futian clearly sensed that many wills were sweeping across him. They were not aimed at him. Instead, it was the major figures of the top forces searching for their own juniors. Dou Zhao, a voice cried out. Dou Zhao turned around and saw a group of people walking over. The leader of the group was a burly middle-aged man with an extremely dominating presence. There was strong pressure coming from his body. He was a top figure among the Dou tribe. Second uncle, Dou Zhao greeted when he saw the person who had come over. How is it? Did you get anything? Dou Zhao's second uncle's voice was like thunder. It was extremely loud and clear. He was full of energy. I have not become a Renhuang. However, that is not important. In God's relic, I have reaped the greatest benefit, Dou Zhao replied. Oh. The major figure of the Dou tribe revealed a look of mild interest and asked, what benefit did you manage to obtain? I have gained a brother, Dou Zhao said in a serious tone. He pointed somewhat proudly at Yi Futian and said, this is the brother that I have sworn to in God's relic, Yi Futian. Yi Futian's face darkened. Was this person forcefully swearing himself as his brother? Dou Zhao's second uncle's gaze turned towards Yi Futian. His gaze was dignified as he appraised Yi Futian. Junior's name is Yi Futian. Yi Futian greeted as a thought flashed past in his mind. Dou Zhao was too shameless. Not bad. The gaze of Dou Zhao's second uncle seemed to contain divine light. With his plane, he naturally could tell that Yi Futian was somewhat extraordinary. He said, Dou Zhao is a proud fellow. Since he is willing to be sworn brothers with you, he must have noticed something extraordinary about you. If you have a chance in the future, please come visit our Dou tribe. A proud fellow? Yi Futian glanced at Dou Zhao. He could not tell. Many thanks, senior. If I get the chance, I will surely pay a visit, Yi Futian said as he nodded his head. Futian, a voice called out. Lord Taixian, as well as Sky River Great Elder, walked over together. They had always been around the area, observing the activity in this place. When they saw that the door of God's relic had opened, they came over. Lord Taixian teacher, Yi Futian greeted them from afar. You have become a Renhuang. The two of them looked at Yi Futian. Lord Taishian revealed a smile. Yi Futian nodded his head. Dou Zhao's second uncle, who was beside them, recognized Lord Taishian when he saw him. This was the person from the higher heavens realm that had broken through the plane. From the looks of it, Yi Futian's relationship with Lord Taishian was not ordinary. Lord Taishian and Sky River Great Elder looked at the Swordmaster of Lihan. Before entering God's relic, the Swordmaster of Lihan appeared very ordinary to them. However, now, he actually had an extraordinary temperament. He had also proven his way at the Runhuang Plain. Xiaqing Yuan, Yaya, and Yusheng also showed changes in their temperament. From the looks of it, they had reaped many benefits from this trip. In mid-air, the major figures of the other top forces also arrived, one after another. In one specific corner with the strongest group, a carriage of phoenix opened a path, and clouds filled the sky. There were many cultivators there. Two silhouettes emerged from the carriage. The man was a rare handsome figure. The woman's appearance was stunning, as though she was a goddess. Emperor Nan, Empress Luo. Many people bowed slightly in their direction. Even the major figures of the top forces also bowed and greeted them. Emperor Nan was the ruler of Nantian Divine Kingdom. Empress Luo was his queen. The two of them had come here in person. Many major figures of the top forces also had to bow and greet them when they saw them. Emperor Nan nodded slightly. His gaze instead turned towards Nan Luoshan. His eyes revealed a doting smile. Although Nan Luoshan was already a Runhuang, she was still his daughter. No matter what her cultivation plane was, that would never change. You have broken through to the Runhuang Plain. It seems like our princess has come across a fateful encounter, Emperor Nan said while smiling. Why did father come personally? Nan Luoshan asked. Other people envied her. However, she herself was not too happy about it. She even secretly sighed inside. She was already a Runhuang, and her parents were still worried about her. We were just passing by, so we dropped in to take a look. Even though Emperor Nan was a major figure at the peak of the 3,000 realms of the Great Path, before Nan Luoshan, he showed no signs of majesty. He had clearly come over intentionally to escort her back, but he claimed that they were just passing by. After all, they only had Nan Luoshan as a daughter. God's relic was renowned as the place where proud sons of heaven fell. How could they not be worried? Some people were born with a starting point much higher than countless others. Many people who saw the scene play out over here lamented. This was especially true for those who were sideline members of the top forces. Even though they had entered God's relic, they were only there as support. Others could only admire the background of Nan Luoshan. Emperor Nan was one of the giants of the 3,000 realms of the Great Path. It was difficult to even meet him on normal days. For his daughter, he had come to wait to escort her back home. Junior's name is Shen Hao. Greetings to Emperor Nan and Empress Luo. A handsome figure appeared below Emperor Nan. The figure bowed when he saw them. Emperor Nan looked at Shen Hao. He nodded in acknowledgement and asked, "Are you a junior from Shen clan?" "Yes." Shen Hao nodded. "Not bad." Emperor Nan nodded briefly and said nothing more. Shen Hao was an outstanding junior of Shen clan. But with Emperor Nan's status, it was sufficient for him to give a one-line comment. "Junior will take my leave now." Shen Hao also didn't say much. After he glanced at Nan Luoshan, he turned around and left. There were many proud sons of heaven in the 3,000 realms of the Great Path. Similarly, there were many exceptional maidens. However, among their generation, it was hard to find another woman with talent and status like Nan Luoshan. The seniors of Shen clan saw what Shen Hao did as well. They didn't comment on it. If Shen Hao could build a good relationship with Nan Luoshan, Shen clan would naturally be happy about it. At the same time, terrifying auras could be sensed coming from various corners of the City of the Ruins. Murderous intent was hidden in those auras. Many cultivators had returned from God's relic with bountiful rewards after seizing their fateful encounters. However, there were some people who stayed behind forever in God's relic. They had lost their lives in the relic. One of them was Gai Shishir of Golden Divine Nation. Right now, the team from Golden Divine Nation emanated dazzling lights as they traversed the space. They strode decisively in the sky and stopped in mid-air. They unleashed their might downwards, Their might was churning with murderous intent. Below them was the party of Futian. Futian raised his head slightly. The golden halo was blinding. His gaze was calm. He had expected this situation. He had killed Gai Shir. He knew that he would surely face some trouble after he came out from God's relic. However, it was impossible for him to have kept Gai Shir alive. The latter had attempted to kill him a few times. They would sooner or later be arch-nemeses. Lord Taixian frowned as his gaze swept across the sky. The leader of the incoming group was the Divine General, who brought Gai Shir to Taixian Mountain for a visit in the past. Futian, another chilly voice rang. The aura of the dynastic overlord of the Heavenly Mandate dynasty was terrifying. It swept towards Futian. Half of the people from the Heavenly Mandate dynasty, who entered God's relic, had actually been killed. They suffered severe losses. Even Tianyu was heavily injured. Moreover, he seemed to be greatly traumatized. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 1651 Provocation. Chapter 1651 Provocation. The voice of the Heavenly Mandate Dynasty dynastic overlord resounded in the space. For an instant, it surprised many people, especially the forces of the Heavenly Mandate realm. The cultivators of divine elephants were the first to walk over to Futian's side. Let's take a look, the cultivators of dragon gods also said. After that Sky Demon Court, 10,000 Divine Mountain, and the other forces also came over. Very quickly, many cultivators were heading over to the area where Futian was. For an instant, it drew the attention of many top figures. Futian. Some cultivators of the top forces that had emerged from God's relic mumbled when they heard this name. Then they said, "Let's go over and take a look." This person was unknown to others before he entered God's relic. However, he stirred up a storm of controversy in God's relic. Compared to Futian, the cultivators of Tianshan Academy, as well as Shun clan, had far fewer conflicts. This was because no one dared to contend with them. If they were asked who had been the most active in God's relic, their answer would definitely be Futian. The people who gathered around the area naturally included the members of some of the forces that had grudges against Futian. He had offended many forces in God's relic. Some of their grudges ran deep while some were shallow. Of course, the reason why Futian's name was such a strong attraction was that he and Yusheng each had a divine item. They were the only group of people that had obtained 2 divine items. What's going on? Lord Taishuan's plane was high. He instantly sensed that something was off in the city of the ruins. Why were cultivators from various forces heading in their direction? He glanced at Futian, who was in front of him. What did this fellow do in God's relic? Emperor Xia and Demon Peacock Emperor came later. Their planes were not that high, so they had come a bit later. When they saw the changes in Futian, the swordmaster of Lihan and Xia Qingyuan's temperament, Emperor Xia and Demon Peacock Emperor revealed bizarre expressions. The two of them glanced at each other and saw the look of astonishment in each other's eyes. They were all Renhuangs now. The swordmaster of Lihan had also proven his way. However, right now, it seemed as though they did not have time to reminisce. Futian raised his head and glanced towards the divine general of the Golden Divine Nation, as well as the Heavenly Mandate Dynasty dynastic overlord. He asked, "Gentlemen, what business do you have with me?" Having reached the Renhuang plain, Futian's temperament had also changed. A faint light of Renhuang circled his body. Currently, he was also an emperor-like figure. Rumble. Golden Divine Light shone down. The killing intent of the cultivator of Golden Divine Nation was intense. Gai Shir was the most outstanding figure among the princes of the Golden Divine Nation. The Divine General was in charge of escorting him into God's relic. However, Gai Shir was killed in God's relic. What is the meaning of this, sir? An astonishing aura similarly swept out from Sky River Great Elder's body. His aura held off the dazzling aura from the cultivator of Golden Divine Nation. Lord Taixian also frowned as his gaze swept over towards the silhouette in midair. What happened? Many senior figures of the top forces asked their juniors who had emerged from God's relic. The cultivators of Sky Demon Court, Dragon gods as well as divine elephants all asked this at the same time. The members of Golden Divine Nation tried to kill Yi Futian and God's relic, and got killed instead. Prince Gai Shirshir was killed. Many cultivators of the Heavenly Mandate dynasty clashed with Yi Futian's side. Many were also killed. Yi Tianyu was humiliatingly defeated by Yi Futian with one spear strike. The members of the various forces of the Heavenly Mandate realm briefly talked about what had happened. The crowd immediately revealed strange expressions. Had this fellow caused such a ruckus in God's relic? The crown prince of Heavenly Mandate dynasty, Yi Tianyu, was renowned as being born supreme. The dynastic overlord placed extremely high expectations on him. Had he been defeated by a strike from Yi Futian's spear? From the looks of it, the dispute over the talents among the current generation of the Heavenly Mandate realm could already come to a close. Yi Tianyu, a monstrous presence who was believed to be standing at the peak of the Heavenly Mandate realm, was defeated with a spear strike. Lord Taixian, Yi Futian killed the prince of my Golden Divine Nation in God's relic. I will be sure to take Yi Futian with me, the Divine General of the Golden Divine Nation said in a cold tone. Lord Taixian turned his gaze towards Yi Futian. Yi Futian replied in a mocking tone. Senior of Golden Divine Nation, you surely jest. Last time, outside of the Divine Palace, Gai Shirshir had tried to kill me once. I let him go that time. In God's relic, your people tried to kill me, relying on having a run huang with them. May I ask, was I supposed to just stand there and let your Golden Divine Nation prince kill me? As for the Heavenly Mandate dynasty, you are even more laughable. Your crown prince, who you consider to be born supreme and without equal in the Heavenly Mandate realm, could not even take a stab from my spear. I spared his life. Since the dynastic overlord is a huge figure in the Heavenly Mandate realm, I need to spare him the humiliation. You defeated him with one spear strike and spared his life? The dynastic overlord's heart trembled. He finally knew what sort of trauma Yi Tianyu had faced. His eyes were full of murderous intent. Back then, he had wanted to immediately kill Yi Futian. He never imagined that Yi Futian had actually grown so fast. Yi Futian had now become the prick in Yi Tianyu's heart. The dynastic overlord had spent so much effort on Yi Tianyu. When Yi Tianyu was still young, the dynastic overlord had sent him to cultivate in the Divine Palace. The dynastic overlord believed that his son, Yi Tianyu, was born supreme. Even if Yi Tianyu could not dominate the 9 realms, he would at least be without equal in the Heavenly Mandate realm. However, a prodigy like Gu Donglu had appeared. Now Yi Futian was another one. Violet Heavenly Palace also arrived at the scene. They also discovered what had transpired in God's relic. The members of their Violet Heavenly Palace had suffered greatly in God's relic and had been cast aside. Lord Taixian, the Heavenly Mandate dynasty has a grudge with this young man. I hope that you will not interfere, the dynastic overlord said as he looked at Lord Taixian. Ever since Lord Taixian broke through to the next plane, dynastic overlord became very cautious of him. He was a figure on the same level as Gu Tianqing back in the day. Yi Tianyu was crowned as someone who was born supreme. Yet in the end, he was as pathetic as a drowned mouse, Yi Futian taunted. No wonder the Heavenly Mandate dynasty is going downhill. You lack tolerance. Even the Purple Gold Rat clan has forsaken you for a better alliance. Purple Gold Rat clan. When members of the Heavenly Mandate dynasty heard Yi Futian mentioning the Purple Gold Rat clan, their facial expressions turned extremely ugly. These vermin. The members of Heavenly Mandate dynasty cursed as their gazes swept towards the Purple Gold Rats. Coincidentally, the Purple Gold Rat Emperor had come in person. Right now, he was still in a daze and did not understand what had happened. You owe me an explanation, the dynastic overlord said as he glanced at the Purple Gold Rat Emperor. The Purple Gold Rat Emperor emanated a terrifying aura. His gaze was fixed on Shu Huangsun. What happened exactly? He questioned. Grandfather, Yi Tianyu indeed pales into insignificance when compared to Yi Futian. Why should we collaborate with the Heavenly Mandate dynasty? Shu Huangsun voiced up. This time, I have worked with Yi Futian and have reaped many benefits. Our clan got a few top-class ritual implements. Fine. The dynastic overlord roared when he heard Shu Huangsun's words. very well. What do you think about this? Purple Gold Rat Emperor's face was clouded with anger. This rascal had actually collaborated with Futian and God's Relic to fight against the Heavenly Mandate dynasty, without consulting him first. Their Purple Gold Rat clan had put in a lot of effort all these years to reach their current status. Xu Huangxuan's treachery would undoubtedly put them in an even more difficult situation. They would be belittled by both alliances. Not to mention their relationship with the Heavenly Mandate dynasty was now up in flames. Right now, the Purple Gold Rat Emperor was holding a wolf by the ears. Apart from handing Xu Huangxuan over to the Heavenly Mandate dynasty, he couldn't think of a better way to resolve this grudge. However, his grandson said that he had gotten a few top-class ritual implements. Since the Purple Gold Rats have forsaken darkness for light, I will let bygones be bygones. In the future, we can still collaborate when the opportunity arises, Futian said loudly. The aura of the dynastic overlord churned, and his murderous intent was petrifying. Was Purple Gold Rat Clan planning to betray the Heavenly Mandate dynasty now? How many ritual implements did you get? What rank are they? Purple Gold Rat Emperor asked Xu Huangxuan through secret transmission. 3. All of them are top-ranked. They will make grandfather stronger. There are both offensive and defensive ritual implements. I have chosen them especially for you, Xu Huangxuan replied. He was very filial. Purple Gold Rat Emperor silently nodded his head in approval. With those ritual implements, he might be able to fight against the Heavenly Mandate dynasty. Since it had come to this, it was too late now to explain anything. Purple Gold Rat Emperor could only play along. Brother I am sorry, Purple Gold Rat Emperor said. Clearly, he had made a decision, and he did not plan to give the Heavenly Mandate dynasty an explanation. It meant that their alliance had fallen apart. The collaboration between Purple Gold Rat Clan and the Heavenly Mandate dynasty had ended. In reality, this was no longer as simple as terminating a partnership. It was impossible for the Heavenly Mandate dynasty to tolerate this act of betraying and sneakily attacking them. The Purple Gold Rat Clan was more detestable than those enemies that came at them directly. Well done, the dynastic overlord exclaimed. Then, he didn't look at the Purple Gold Rat Emperor again. He would remember this grudge. When they returned to their realm, he would pay him back. However, now is not the time for it. Futian watched everything in silence. After he obtained the treasures in the spatial sacred hall, he did not treat the Purple Gold Rat Clan shabbily. He had done so exactly for this moment. He would let the Purple Gold Rats improve their abilities. In turn, they would fight against the Heavenly Mandate dynasty in the future. It was such a perfect plan. Emperor Xia and Demon Peacock Emperor glanced at Futian with discerning gazes. Of course they knew of Futian's trick. This fellow was digging a pit for the two top forces of the Heavenly Mandate realm. Lord Taixian. The Divine General of Golden Divine Nation couldn't help but cue for Lord Taixian again, since the latter still remained silent. Be it the Divine General or Dynastic Overlord, most likely neither of them were a match for Lord Taixian now. Hence, everything depended on Lord Taishuan's stand. The incident has been made clear. The two juniors attacked Futian when they were in God's Relic, but their skills were weaker than that of Futian. Therefore, there is nothing left to be said. As seniors, it is not befitting of your status to come and demand that I hand over a junior. Lord Taixian looked at both of them and said, whatever happened in the relic, it is a matter among the juniors. What is done, that's all. The cultivators of the two top forces fell silent. It seemed like Lord Taixian was going to interfere in this matter. Lord Taixian has advanced to the next level, but the Golden Divine Nation has been rooted in the higher heavens realm for many years. Our strength is not something Taixian Mountain can compare with. Lord Taixian is shielding someone who is not related to you. Is he worth your care? The Divine General of Golden Divine Nation challenged. If the deceased was any other man, perhaps he could accept the fact. However, it was Gai Sure. Even the Divine General could not bring himself to inform His Highness of this news. Futian has trained in Taixian Mountain before. Even though I didn't accept him as my disciple, he is still counted as one. Now he is trained by my good friend. He is not unrelated to me. Lord Taixian responded indifferently. If you plan to escalate this feud between the juniors to a battle between Golden Divine Nation and Taishan Mountain, it's your decision. The Divine General wanted to use the Golden Divine Nation to pressure him? Benefactor Yi explored God's relic with great ease. He seized a spatial sacred hall that contained countless top-ranked ritual implements. Even though many of the ritual implements have been given to others, there was still a treasure trove left untouched. Moreover, he obtained the divine item left by the great emperor. He is such a talent. It is impossible for you to want to take him away easily, sir. A voice sounded abruptly. Many top figures narrowed their eyes when they heard the words. Yi Futian had obtained a treasure trove? If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. Chapter 1652 Joining the Battle. Chapter 1652 Joining the Battle. A treasure trove in the God's Relic. What did it signify? Even the hearts of the top figures leapt when they heard about it. When Yi Futian heard this, his eyes narrowed slightly, revealing a glint of murderous intent. He stared in the direction of Xinxing clan. The person who spoke up was naturally a member of the Xinxing clan. That bold monk had threatened him when they were in the God's Relic. In the end, he didn't collaborate with the Xinxing clan, and they chose to join the alliance of the Heavenly Mandate dynasty. Xinxing clan left after they were defeated. Surely, they must have felt dissatisfied. Right now, as the monk brought this topic up, his motive was execrable. There were plenty of treasures in the God's Relic. Many people obtained them. Even though I seized a treasure trove, I have distributed most of the treasures to the forces in my alliance. I kept very few of them, Yi Futian retorted with a cold voice. Bald monk, your sneak attack in the God's Relic failed. Now that we have left the relic, you are still plotting evil schemes. Are you so desperate to enter purgatory? Yi Futian released streaks of Runhuang's might to pressure the monk. The cultivators of the Xinxing clan frowned. A Runhuang blocked in front of everyone. He put his palms together, and his gaze was stern. My Xinxing clan disciple has merely spoken the truth. There is no need for Benefactor Yi to be enraged by his words. The monk's words are not false. Even though he has given out many treasures to others, he still kept a huge portion to himself. He kept all the top-ranked Runhuang ritual implements. Someone testified for the member of Xinxing clan. The speaker was a swordsman of the Heavenly Sword Hall. Sword Saint of Avicii, the leader of Heavenly Sword Hall, was killed by Yi Futian when they were in God's Relic. Many of the remaining members were killed too. Only a few of them came out alive. Their situation was pitiful. Indeed, we saw that with our own eyes. A cultivator of School of the Emperor Star agreed. Shen Hao stood in midair in the distance. His gaze was sharp as it shot over to where Yi Futian was. He actually obtained another treasure trove before this? Is this person the inheritor of Sky River Great Elder? An elder of Shen clan asked. Shen Hao nodded. How are his ability and talents? The Shen clan elder asked. Very impressive. He was one of the 10 people who managed to obtain a divine item in the end. He utilized the might of the Heavenly Palace to prove his way. His divine will is probably a flawless one, Shen Hao said. His words caused the cultivators of Shen clan to reveal strange looks as they glanced over at Sky River Great Elder. Back then, Sky River Great Elder had also cultivated in the Shen clan. They were quite familiar with him. They never expected that after so many years, the last inheritor that he chose actually had such talent. No wonder Sky River Great Elder had sent Yi Futian into God's Relic. Your lot did not dare nor had the ability to snatch the treasures in God's Relic. Now that you have come out of God's Relic, are you preparing to ask your seniors to do it for you? Do Zhao said as he looked at those who had spoken. You all are a disgrace to your ancestors. Do Zhao, you yourself have stooped so low. You must have benefited greatly from following behind Yi Futian. It seems that you feel very proud. The cultivators of School of the Emperor Star continued. Their tone was unfriendly. Show yourself. Do Zhao could no longer hold his temper. He took a step forward and yelled at the other party while pointing at them. The expression of the cultivators of the School of the Emperor Star turned ugly. The senior figures also frowned. Don't just hide behind there and instigate. Come out and try to seize the treasures from Yi Futian if you dare. Dou Zhao roared. Many people have obtained treasures in God's relic. You all really know how to choose your targets. You all did not have the ability to seize the treasures when we were in God's relic. Now that you see a chance, you are preparing to instigate your seniors to act? Why don't we let Yi Futian just stand here? And if you dare to come out alone to take his treasures, I, Dou Zhao, will call you Lord. If you don't dare to do so, then just shut up and keep quiet behind there. Don't just hide among the crowd and yell. It is such a disgrace. Dou Zhao's thunderous voice caused everyone's eardrums to tremble. The expressions of the members of the school of the Emperor Star turned even uglier. Right now, Golden Divine Nation and the Heavenly Mandate Dynasty were against Yi Futian. These fellows were standing behind, throwing oil into the fire. They were undoubtedly putting Yi Futian in a very disadvantageous position. If each and every force wanted to intervene, it would become very troublesome. Rumble. Right at that moment, an unparalleled divine might descended from afar, causing many people to raise their heads to look up to the sky above. The pressure from the might was domineering. It immediately pressed down on the entire city of the ruins. Many prominent figures looked up into the sky. From the distance, the brilliant divine light of the great path shone down from above. In an instant, golden divine light flooded the sky, blinding the eyes of those present. The gazes of the top figures pierced the sky above. The silhouette of an unparalleled deity seemed to be traversing the space, heading in their direction. Before his person had arrived, the pressure of his might was already felt. Emperor Nan looked up into the sky in the distance. He had not imagined that the Lord of Golden Divine Nation would come in person. From the looks of it, Golden Divine Nation dynastic overlord had high expectations for Gai Shirshir. Gai Shirshir's death caused him to personally come to the city of the ruins. I have heard that Lord Taishian has shattered the shackles of the plane. I wonder how your current ability is now. A voice came from the sky, and was extremely domineering. Lord Taishian looked up into the sky. The might of the great path from his body enveloped the heavens and the earth. He then took a step forward. His silhouette disappeared immediately. In an instant, he seemed to have traversed hundreds of miles. Far off in the sky above, the roar of the great path rumbled. The space shook, and the two of them seemed to be battling in the sky. However, even over here, everyone else could feel how frightening their attacks were. Many people revealed strange looks. They never imagined that they would witness a battle between figures at the peak of the realms. Silhouettes flew up into the sky. Their will swept out across the sky as they observed the battle from afar. Even figures like Emperor Nan were somewhat interested in the battle. In the 9 realms, battles of such caliber were rarely seen. It was hard to come across one in several years. The reason why Emperor Nan had personally come to escort his daughter, Nan Luotian, back home, was that there would always be some commotion after God's relic closed. He was worried, and he doted upon Nan Luotian greatly. Hence he had come in person. With him present, no accidents would happen. Yi Futian glanced at the sky above. The two of them seemed to be battling far away. He did not know how far away they were. Even his will could not cover such a far-off distance, let alone his eyesight. They could only hear faint rumbles and a faint melody. Lord Taishian mastered the song of the lost divine. Yi Futian wondered whether Lord Taishian could put up a fight against the Golden Divine Nation dynastic overlord. The Heavenly Mandate Dynasty dynastic overlord had a cold and stern expression. Seeing that Lord Taishian had disappeared, his gaze fell on Yi Futian. Right now, who else could protect Yi Futian? Capture him. The Heavenly Mandate Dynasty dynastic overlord immediately ordered. In an instant, his might of way swept over the space. However, at this moment, a palm print struck out directly at the Heavenly Mandate Dynasty dynastic overlord. He looked towards his attacker. To his surprise, it was Sky River Great Elder. Rumble. A fierce will swept over the land. In an instant, an astonishing storm of the great path swept up in the surrounding space. The city of the ruins could not withstand a battle of such caliber. Many top figures defended their juniors from the waves of the great path. The Heavenly Mandate Dynasty dynastic overlord and Sky River Great Elder began to battle. Both of them were at the same plane. They were both upper-level renhuangs at the 9th tier of the Divine Wheel. Many cultivators were shocked. They had not expected that the dynastic overlord and Sky River Great Elder would engage in battle right away. Second uncle, Yi Futian is my sworn brother. You can't stay out of this, Do Zhao said as he looked at his second uncle. Second uncle glanced at Do Zhao surprised. This kind of battle would involve many parties. Even though Do Zhao was carefree, he was someone who considered the bigger picture. After all, Do Zhao was trained to be the next tribe leader of Do tribe. He was the only one among the younger generations who could unleash the will of sevenfold fighting god. His intelligence was without question. If he involved himself in the battle, Do tribe might offend the forces that were at feud with Yi Futian. Do Zhao, are you sure? Second uncle secretly transmitted his voice and questioned Do Zhao. Their eyes were locked onto each other. I'm sure, Do Zhao said while nodding his head. Okay. Do Zhao's second uncle said no more. Do Zhao was close to breaking through to the Renhuang plain. Since he was trained as the successor of the tribe, he would sooner or later be in control of the entire Do tribe. Up until this point, this matter was probably Do Zhao's first decision, which would affect the outcome of the conflict among the top forces. Since Do Zhao was so determined about it, then he would obey his command. Bang! As soon as he agreed, an extremely powerful will of fighting god erupted from his body. His body was encircled in brilliant light, as though fighting god had descended into the world. He shot up into the sky, sending a punch in the direction of the divine general of Golden Divine Nation, who was pursuing Yi Futian. Bang! There was the sound of explosions. The punch directly traversed the sky. The arm of a golden god of war, that was 1,000 meters long, appeared in the sky. The punch crashed towards the opponent's spear, immediately adhering to the opponent's attack, and shooting up to the sky. This punch directly traversed hundreds of miles, shooting up to the battlefield high in the sky. The Do tribe joined the battle. Many thanks, Yi Futian said to Do Zhao. Since we are sharing our fortunes, we will naturally endure the hardship together. Do Zhao replied while looking at Yi Futian. I am a dignified descendant of fighting god. I am not who you imagine me to be. You are loyal, Yi Futian said with a smile. A huge battle instantly erupted in the sky above. Many auras were pressing down in this direction. Although the cultivators of many forces had yet to attack, they were eyeing to do so intently. For example, the forces that bore grudges against Yi Futian, such as the Snow Divine Kingdom, Emperor Star Realm, Heavenly Sword Hall, Violet Heavenly Palace and Prison Fort Clan, as well as Martial God Clan from the Central Emperor Realm, all stood at one side with their gazes staring in this direction. Wu Zhan's gaze was exceptionally sharp. If it weren't for Yi Futian, the spatial sacred hall would have been theirs for the taking. Their Renhuang, Wu Meng, had died at the hands of Yi Futian. Aside from them, many other forces like the Shinqing clan, Celestial Worthy Temple, Clan of the God of Ghost, Divine Capital of Shieling, and Fate World were also staring at the battlefield. All of them stayed out of the battle for now. They were observing how the situation would change. Of course, there were many forces which had good relationships with Yi Futian, such as the Alliance forces from the Heavenly Mandate Realm. The cultivators of divine elephants had been following Yi Futian closely. They had a close relationship to begin with. Besides that, there were dragon gods and sky demon court. At the moment, the seniors were all communicating with their juniors through secret sound transmissions to find out what had happened in God's relic. After they knew what had happened, their hearts trembled slightly. The strongest cultivator among the younger generation of the Heavenly Mandate Realm was undoubtedly Yi Futian. Aside from the forces of the Heavenly Mandate Realm, there were still a few forces that looked kindly on Yi Futian, such as Yuanyang Clan and Clan of the Seven Slayers. Yi Futian's gaze swept over the battlefield in the sky above. His body gradually floated up into the air with his long spear in hand. It emanated astonishing fighting will and was extremely sharp. This scene caused the gazes of many people to be glued onto him. Yi Futian seemed to be preparing to personally join the fray. He was the center of this storm. If he made a move, he would be putting himself in danger. However, Yi Futian was not bothered by this concern. Now he had proven his way and had entered into the Runhuang Plain. He had forged a perfect divine wheel. He was confident that he could defend himself. Of course, he was qualified to join the battle. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. Chapter 1653 Divine Intervention. Chapter 1653 Divine Intervention. Besides Yi Futian, the Renhuangs of Dou tribe and Taishan Mountain also flew up into the sky. A gaze locked on Yi Futian. Someone asked, "Are you capable of handling this?" Yi Futian turned and saw a beautiful face. It was none other than Taishan Housemaster, Empress Yan, who recommended him to Taishan Mountain in the past. "Housemaster, you underestimate me," Yi Futian replied wryly. His body shot up into the sky in a straight line. Empress Yan blinked. Both she and the String Emperor followed behind Yi Futian and flew up into the sky. They were worried that he might be harmed. After all, this fellow had just broken through to the Runhuang Plain not long ago. His plane was still not stable. In a battle between the Renhuangs of the top forces, a moment of carelessness would result in death. The two dynastic overlords of Golden Divine Nation, as well as the Heavenly Mandate Dynasty, had personally come here. This battle was not just a simple spar. The other party would really try to kill Yi Futian. Be careful. The String Emperor swept a glance at the sky above. He saw a powerful Renhuang from the Golden Divine Nation heading over towards Yi Futian. The String Emperor extended his 5 long and slender fingers. He grabbed at the air, and countless strings of the Great Path seemed to appear in the heavens above and blocked the attack from the other party. He plucked the strings of the Great Path with his hand, and sword will swept out. String Emperor's body immediately leapt over Yi Futian's figure and shot up into the air as he forced the other party back. "Many thanks, Senior," Yi Futian said. His gaze swept towards the other direction. Then with a flash of his silhouette, he headed in that direction. Over there was a cultivator of the Heavenly Mandate Dynasty at the Runhuang Plain. His plane was that of a lower-level Renhuang, and his divine will was only at the 2nd tier. The Renhuang saw Yi Futian heading towards him. A cold look flashed past in the eyes of the Renhuang. The divine wheel in his body burst forth, and his will swept out. Even though Yi Futian's talent was extraordinary, he had just broken through to the Runhuang Plain. Was Yi Futian planning on using him to try out his powers? Buzz. Yi Futian swept a glance at his opponent and directly traversed the space. After reaching the Runhuang Plain, his speed was even quicker. In an instant, he immediately landed in front of his opponent and engaged in close-quarter combat. The expression of the Renhuang changed slightly. Yi Futian was acting so presumptuous. Yi Futian had just proven his way, and he dared to engage in close-quarter combat? Yi Futian's figure became way, and his divine wheel of the Great Path emanated a gleaming divine light. A terrifying storm of massacre brewed with him at the center. A spear appeared in his hand as well. He attacked violently without hesitation. Bang! The spears collided. The onlookers were blinded by a dazzling light. The next moment the Runhuang disappeared. The will of the Runhuang still lingered in the space, yet his figure was nowhere to be found. He had been penetrated by the spear and turned into dust. Instant kill. Everyone widened their eyes when they saw what happened. It was as though the person that Yi Futian had killed was not a Renhuang. The Renhuang did not even manage to defend himself, and was killed instantly by a strike from Yi Futian's spear. He most likely did not even know how he was killed. The divine wheel of the Great Path was forged when a cultivator broke through to the Runhuang Plain. There was a stark difference between every tier of the divine wheel. The might of the will, unleashed by a 2nd-tier divine wheel that resonated with the Great Path, could surely suppress the will unleashed by a 1st-tier divine wheel. However, even so, the Runhuang of the Heavenly Mandate Dynasty was instantly killed with a spear strike. He did not even have the opportunity to use his power. The difference in divine wheels. Upon seeing this scene, everyone conjectured that the Runhuang of Heavenly Mandate Dynasty most likely had little experience in fighting against other renhuangs. Some top forces from the Central Emperor realm had the best understanding of how much a difference it would make for cultivators with different tiers of divine wheels to engage in a battle. Futian instantly killed his opponent with a spear strike. It proved that the difference between their two divine wheels was huge and could not be overcome at all. Even though the Renhuang of the Heavenly Mandate dynasty was on a higher level, he was still killed in one shot. Moreover, Futian had not even shown his divine wheel of the Great Path. Even for top forces, a cultivator at the Renhuang plane was considered the mainstay of a force. It was hard to cultivate a Renhuang. However, when battles arose, a Renhuang was killed so easily. It only took a strike from the spear. In the sky below, Emperor Xia raised his head. His face twitched when he saw the spear that Futian wielded. He looked at the Demon Peacock Emperor beside him. The Demon Peacock Emperor also looked at him. There were looks of astonishment in both of their eyes. Futian was a Renhuang just like them. How powerful was his ability now? Rumble. Suddenly, an enormous power of the Great Path spurted towards Futian. Swiftly, Futian turned around and thrust his spear forward. Like a meteorite, his spear shattered the incoming spear. However, an alarming pressure surrounded his body all of a sudden. A body forged of gold appeared above Futian. The figure was brilliant. His divine wheel of the Great Path shone. He was a golden ancient god. Futian had seen this person before. Back then, this person had even attacked Futian. It was none other than the Prince of Golden Divine Nation and the elder brother of Gai Shishir, Gai Jiotian. Last time, outside of Divine Palace, Gai Shishir had lost to Futian. This Gai Jiotian was overbearing. Right now, Gai Jiotian one again came charging towards him. The pair of golden eyes contained fierce murderous intent. Futian killed his younger brother. He did not say anything, merely standing proudly in the sky. All around him, figures of golden ancient gods descended from the sky. They suppressed this side of the sky. Gai Jiotian was like a deity that shone with the sun and the moon. The light of the divine wheel of the Great Path swept out. The golden ancient gods pounced downwards. The divine sound could be faintly heard. It was the sigh of the divine god. Gai Jiotian was a lower-level Renhuang, at the third tier of the divine wheel. Futian exclaimed internally when he sensed his opponent's aura. His opponent was at the same level as Empress Yen. Back when they were outside of the divine palace, Futian had fought against Empress Yen. Gai Jiotian's divine will was at the celestial level. As the crowned prince of Golden Divine Nation, the divine wheel that he had forged was naturally not ordinary. It was a celestial level third-tier divine wheel. One could imagine the domineering might of his divine wheel. "Let's go," Emperor Xia said. He and the Demon Peacock Emperor were ready to lend a hand. Their divine wheels were only at the third tier. Moreover, theirs were gold-level divine wheels. In other words, Gai Jiotian, the crowned prince of the Golden Divine Nation, was stronger than both of them. Although Futian had exceptional talent, he had just broken through to the Renhuang plane. With Futian's first-tier divine wheel, the difference between his ability and his opponent's was too great. How could he possibly win in this battle? Right now battles were happening at every corner of the sky. There were few people left. Emperor Xia and Demon Peacock Emperor could no longer sit out of this. "Your Highness, please wait," a voice rang. Emperor Xia turned around and saw the Sword Master of Lihan. The former put on a perplexed look. "Your Highness, let's watch for a while more," the Sword Master of Lihan suggested. Sword Master of Lihan? The difference in tiers between Futian and his opponent is huge. Emperor Xia raised his concern. The level of divine wheels can make up for the difference in tiers, the Sword Master of Lihan said. If Futian really can't handle him, only then will we join the battle. Even if Futian could not defeat his opponent, he would not be crushed in a short amount of time. He definitely had the power to put up a fight. The level of divine wheel? Emperor Xia revealed a shock expression. The level of Gai Jiotian's divine wheel was already very high. It dazzled with a blinding divine light. Could it be that the level of Futian's divine wheel was even higher? Despite having doubts, Emperor Xia accepted the suggestion of the Sword Master of Lihan. He didn't join the battle. He looked at the battle in the sky and was ready to lend a hand when necessary. In the sky, Yi Futian stood undeterred as he was flooded by the golden statues. From inside his body, brilliant light suddenly burst forth. This light covered the sky and pierced the endless space. It was as though there was divine light of the great path circling his figure. The worldly great path resonated with his. He truly achieved the state of becoming one with the world. In the sky above Yi Futian, a dazzling strange phenomenon appeared. Endless will of the great path appeared like waterfalls that churned towards Yi Futian's body. Dazzling divine light radiated outwards, covering thousands of miles. It could truly be called the divine wheel of the great path. Its divine light covered the sky. His divine wheel is flawless. It is at the divine level. The major figures of the 9 realms lowered their heads and looked over in Yi Futian's direction. In their eyes, there were only flawless or flawed divine wheels. Only a flawless divine wheel was a complete divine wheel of the great path. Only then could it be considered divine. Divine light covered the sky, radiating 3,000 miles. When Emperor Xia saw this divine wheel, his heart trembled inside him. At this moment, he felt that his own divine wheel was a joke. Could the divine wheel that he forged when he reached the Runhuang Plain truly be considered a divine wheel of the great path? If he were to compare his divine wheel with that of Yi Futian, his own would probably pale into insignificance. Flawless. This was a truly flawless divine wheel. The heavens revealed strange phenomena, and divine light covered the sky. Many people were mesmerized by this gorgeous scene. Although many cultivators that had forged flawless divine wheels had appeared in God's relic, in reality, those were all the flawless divine wheels that normal cultivators would encounter. Once outside of God's relic, among the innumerable cultivators of the 3,000 realms of the great path, how many had flawless divine wheels? In the heavenly mandate realm, before Yi Futian, there were none who had flawless divine wheels. Even the top figures of the realm did not have flawless divine wheels. This also meant that the difficulty of forging a flawless divine wheel was far greater than the difficulty of becoming a top force. Once one completed this step, it was possible for them to stand at the peak of the 3,000 realms of the great path. Even Emperor Nan and the cultivators of the Sheng clan were paying close attention to Yi Futian. Strange looks flashed past in their gazes. Not only did Yi Futian have a flawless divine wheel, but divine phenomena had also appeared. Did this person have a huge fateful encounter in God's relic? Emperor Nan asked Nan Luoshan, who was beside him. He should have from the looks of it. A strange look flashed past Nan Luoshan's beautiful gaze. This person's divine will was actually even more dazzling than her own. Endless strings of the great path seemed to appear around them. The sound of qin could be heard playing on its own. With the great path as its strings, it actually suppressed the sigh of the divine god. Beams of radiant divine light shot out like flawlessly sharp swords. They pierced towards the statues of the golden ancient gods. An intense rumbling sound thundered. No one knew how much will the divine wheel of the great path that Yi Futian forged had consumed. Yi Futian had consumed so many fruits of the way. With the support of the world tree, the foundation of his great path was extremely solid. A first-tier divine wheel is going against a third-tier divine wheel. The crowd revealed bizarre expressions. The aura on Yi Futian's body was actually not at a disadvantage at the slightest. His power of the great path also showed no signs of being suppressed. Gai Jiotian's facial expression changed slightly. A flawless divine wheel. This was the goal of all the disciples of Golden Divine Nation all this while. But Gai Jiotian had failed to forge one. Initially, Gai Shishir had a chance to forge a flawless divine wheel upon entering God's relic this time. However, he had been killed by Yi Futian and had perished. Even though Yi Futian had a flawless divine wheel, what of it? There was still a difference between their two planes. He did not believe that the tier of Yi Futian's divine wheel could overcome it. Gai Jiotian's divine wheel was also at the celestial level. Gai Jiotian raised his hand. The heavens and earth resonated, and the great path roared. A palm print directly struck out from his palm. In an instant, a gigantic golden palm print appeared in the sky above Yi Futian's head. Patterns of the great path seemed to be carved on the palm print. It appeared like the face of a deity. It was as though a deity had descended from the heavens and wanted to destroy all of existence. Aside from a flawless divine wheel, the other divine wheels were all common level. Futian extended his left hand. He pointed a finger at the heavens and countless divine swords resonated. A storm of sword chi swept out and formed a sky-shattering sword. It immediately shattered the gigantic palm print. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.